The first concept which we'll take up is, as you can see here, this is the first one. It's the net interest income. Now, if you all know, for any bank is like any other organization. It's a profit earning organization, right? And how does a bank earn money? Can you just tell me what's the major source of earning for a bank? Anyone?
Deposits.
Lending loans.
Right.
Interest on loans.
rate spread.
Correct. The interest rate spread. All right. So basically the interest which is earned on loans and advances. So if you look at the balance sheet of a bank and you go to the asset side, the major component of which is basically the loans and advances, because it is earning interest from it. So when you look at the top line, and I say top line and bottom line, I hope you know top line is the revenues and bottom line is the profits. When you look at the top line for a bank and the total income, that is the revenues which a bank is making, around 50% of it or even more comes from the interest which is earned on loans and advances. So that is the interest income. Now, why the term net interest income is used? The reason is because interest is earned from the loans and advances, and it is paid also on the FDs and term deposits, which the customers make. For example, you approach ICICI Bank and you invest your 5 lakh rupees in a 5-year FD. So as a customer of a bank, you are entitled to receive income. So for a bank, it is going to be an expense. So if you see here, what I've tried to do is, this is what is called as net interest. Netting means interest received minus interest paid. This is the concept of netting. And net interest margin would be when you divide this difference of interest income received minus interest which is paid on FDs, the difference between the two, when divided by the interest earning assets, which means basically the loans and advances. This is called the net interest margin, or the NIM, a very important indicator. Higher it is, better is the profitability, better is the fund, more financially sound is the bank. So this is the off-task question in terms of NIM. So if for example, I say that ICICI Bank is enjoying a net interest margin of 12%, it means if 100 rupees is the loans and advances which ICICI Bank is giving to its customers, 12 rupees out of that is the net interest which is earning from it. So this is known as the net interest margin. And if you look at only the numerator, it's called the net interest income. So this is the net interest income, which is known here, right? And so this is the first parameter. Linked to this, there are two important ratios. One of which is called operating profit margin. Now, operating profit is the EBIT which you all talk about, the earnings before interest and tax. Now, for a bank, the major source of revenue, operating revenue, is the net interest income, which we just spoke about in the previous slide. So this is the major source of revenue. When you subtract the operating expenses, when I'm talking about operating expenses, can you give me an idea? What would be one example of an operating expense which a bank would incur? Quickly, give me an example.
Rent,
Employment,
electricity used.
Correct.
Salaries given to employees.
Right. Salaries to employees, the rent which has to be paid, possibly some new software which has been implemented, some kind of technological upgrade which the bank has gone into. So that is in a yearly basis we're talking about. So that is the operating expense which we see here, right? So operating profit would be net interest income minus the operating expenses. This would be the profit which the bank will retain from its operations, solely from operations, divided by the total interest income which the bank is making. This is known as operating profit margin. Again, for example, if it's 10%, it basically means if 100 rupees is the interest income which the bank has, 10 rupees is the operating profit from it. Right? And higher it is, better it is. In line with the NIM which we had done in the previous slide, net interest margin. Another important ratio is called the cost to income ratio. Okay, cost would be operating expenses. As you rightly spoke about, the rent, the technological upgrade expenses, the more salary, the major component of operating expenses, salary. So operating expense when divided by the total income. Now total income will be NII, definitely, but there is also called non-interest income. Now, again, from you, what can be a non-interest income for a bank? Can you give me an example?
From marketable securities.
Bank charges.
Correct.
Bank charges.
Correct. The fee. So are you talking about the fee income?
Processing fee.
The processing fee, the fee charged on services offered by the bank.
Penalties.
Yes, correct. The penalties, the foreclosure charges, etc. So that comes under non-interest income. So the total income for any bank is a combination of two things. Please remember, the net interest income and the non-interest income. So the cost to income ratio is indicating how efficiently the bank is operating. Now, should this ratio ideally be higher on the higher side or lower side?
Lower.
It should be on the lower side.
It should be on the lower side. So you mean to say operating expenses should be many multiples of the total income which the bank is making? It's cost to income, not income to cost. Just a thought. Let's say we have two banks, ICICI Bank, HDFC Bank. One of them, ICICI, has 5 as the cost to income ratio and the other has 8. Which is more efficient? 5/1 or 8/1? Quick.
5/1.
5/1. Because the cost is lesser.
Correct.
Cost is lesser.
Correct. Perfect. So you're getting it. Okay. So these are the two important ratios. Okay. Now in the diagram, if you remember the first diagram, we spoke about NII as the first head. Next, we were talking about total deposits. Now, deposits in any bank is a combination of 3 things: current account, savings account, and term deposits. When I'm talking about term deposits, I'm referring to the FDs. The fixed deposits are term deposits. So if you see, this is actual figures taken out from March 2015 to March 2019. Over a 5-year period, we've seen the total deposits actually going up from 3615. This is in rupees billion to 6529. So we see a a basic increase in overall, be it term deposits, current account, and savings account. So the orange which you see here is the current account. Now, between the 3, can you tell me, can you mute yourself, others, please? It's too much noise. Yeah. So between current account, savings account, and FD, which one doesn't carry any interest on it? Is non-interest.
Current account.
Current account.
Current account, correct. And the highest interest would be on?
Term deposits.
Term deposits.
Deposits.
So therefore, if I ask you one simple thing, if I take current accounts and savings account together in the numerator, all right, and I call it CASA, all right, CASA, this stands for current account, this stands for savings account, and I divide it by the total deposits, which is obviously a combination of CASA and term deposits. So this ratio should be high or low, or what will it indicate? Give me an idea. Remember,
The higher ratio will indicate that the bank is getting deposits at a low cost.
Correct. Because the higher the proportion, let's say we have one bank with a 40% CASA. Okay, this is 40% or 0.4. Then we've got another bank with a 60% CASA. What does it indicate? Let's say this is ICICI and let us say this is HDFC Bank. All right. Now, HDFC with a higher CASA of 60%, it indicates that out of the total deposits, 60% are from the current account, savings account. We already know current account, the bank does not have to pay interest on it. It is non-interest. Shivani, please mute yourself. Are you saying something to me? I think, yeah. And savings account, minimal interest of 4 to 6% is paid. So the higher the proportion of this category of deposits, the lower would be the cost of funding for a bank. Lower would be the cost of funding. Why I say cost of funding? Because it is from the deposit base, majorly, that the bank uses the deposits to offer loans to other customers. So you have, in an economy, you have money going from the lenders to the borrowers. Who are the lenders? The people who deposit funds, who have surplus funds. So either they open a savings account, which is a salary account, or they open an FD, or they're running a business and they're opening a current account. So in an economy, it's a circular flow of cash, right? Which goes from the surplus spending units, which is the lenders, and it goes to the borrowers who need money. These are people with surplus funds. S stands for surplus and D stands for deficit. And this is how cash moves in an economy. And this is where the bank comes in and plays the role of an intermediary, gets money on it. So what does it do? It when the bank is, when you're opening a deposit with the bank, it offers interest at a lower rate and takes higher rate of interest from the borrower. So it's possibly charging 10% on a loan. So this is the money which the bank is going to receive. It is the interest earned, and it's paying possibly 6% average interest on total deposits. So the spread, I think one of the students spoke about the interest spread. The interest spread is plus 10% minus 6%. And that is the, yeah, that is how the bank makes money, right? Okay. We quickly move to total advances. We've spoken about it. So from the deposit base, deposit is one of the major sources of funding for a bank, because from the deposit base, we have the majorly the advances coming in. So we have the total advances, and we also see from overall it's a rising trend in terms of total advances, which the banking community as a whole in India has shown over the last couple of years. So this is just a diagrammatic representation taken from ICICI Bank. Okay, the next pointer, I'm going to go very basic, nothing hi-fi on this, is the total balance sheet. Now, we talked about this earlier. We have the assets here, right? Major component assets being the loans. And then we have the liabilities on this side. Major component obviously being equity and borrowed capital. And borrowed capital deposit is something which the bank is a major source of funding for a bank. See, liabilities are sources of funding. So we have either the bank gets itself listed on the NSE, BSE, and we've got equity or share capital, or the bank may take another loan from another bank. So we have interbank borrowing going on, or the bank also has a deposit base. We have the savings account and term deposits from which the bank can use some of the money and pass it on as loans and advances. Under assets, of course, the bank also does its own investments. So it's got its own assets in place. And of course, goodwill and some other derivatives it invests in. So we have you just have to remember two things. On the asset side, the major component is the loans and advances, be it consumer loans, be it your collateral based or non-collateral based. So it can either be in the form of home loans, which are collateralized loans, right? Or you can have security free without collateral, which are carrying a very high interest rate because of the risk which is involved, right? So on the liability side, just remember it is borrowed capital, deposit being a major component, and of course share capital. So these are three important terms to remember.
Ma'am, I had a doubt.
Yes.
I have a doubt. So goodwill can be written in this asset side?
Yes, yes. I mean, goodwill is an intangible asset, right? Goodwill, like for any company, goodwill is an intangible asset. So we can go into depth of how do you value an intangible asset, but probably we'll park it for now. But yes, goodwill is an intangible asset. Like for any other organization, bank is also a profit-making company.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
one more doubt.
Please.
Ma'am, can you just shed some light on contingent liabilities?
Okay, here contingent liabilities. Okay, now contingent liabilities, you want to go into depths of accounting in terms of, see, contingent liabilities, when you talk about the balance sheet of a bank, the liabilities which are still some interest which has to be still paid, right? So for example, in tier 2 capital, when you're talking about subordinated debt, right? Do you know subordinated debt?
No, ma'am.
Okay, now if you look at this graph quickly, this diagram, it talks to you about a bank's performance. And just by looking at the diagram, what all you can pick up, we spoke about some things, like we spoke about NII. And if you see, this is the SBI Q1 result. And you see a minus 3.5, which means compared to the last quarter, there is a 3.5% decline of net interest income. Minus 8.6 for other incomes. We just spoke about fee income as the other income, and there's a decline of minus 8.6% on fee income here. Advances, loans and advances increased by 0.5%. This is how you interpret a result for a bank. And the deposits have also grown by 13.3%. Now, what has also increased, and this is called a slippage in banking terminology, it's called gross NPAs. We will speak about gross NPAs possibly in the next slide. And that has increased by 6%. NPA stands for, any idea? Okay, sorry, you can't unmute, right, Unnati? I can't.
Yes, but they can write in chat. So definitely,
okay.
guys, you can go ahead and write in the chat.
Any idea what NPA stands for in banking? Just put it in the chat if you have some idea about it.
Though I know this one.
Right, we've got a good number of answers. Okay, NPA stands for non-performing asset. And when is a loan classified as a non-performing asset? When the principal or the interest is not paid for a period of 90 days or more. That is known as non-performing asset. And of course, if it continues to be a non-performing asset for a long period of time, there are other classifications. You also call it a substandard asset if it continues to be an NPA for 1 year or less. And then if it continues to be a substandard asset for another 1 year, we call it a doubtful asset. And if with all the audits, the RBI declares it as a loss asset, it means it is going to cause a complete loss to the bank. Nothing can be recovered. No recovery is possible whatsoever. And it's going to cause loss to the bank. It's referred to as a loss asset. That is what an NPA is broadly. So when a loan is not being paid for a period of 90 days or more, be it the principal or the interest, that is referred to as a non-performing asset. Asset is the loans and advances which a bank makes. So that has increased by around 6% here. And yeah, another quick ratio I'll cover. This is called the capital adequacy ratio. Capital adequacy ratio is basically, what I'll do is I'll take you to the next slide to help you understand better. Yeah, so this is what capital adequacy ratio means. Capital adequacy ratio is how much the bank is basically having as capital. It means how fundamentally sound the bank is. The higher the capital adequacy ratio, what capital means is it's the ratio of capital. Capital is the equity capital. It's the debt capital, right? Which the bank has divided by the assets. Assets means the loans and advances. So, but I don't only write assets, I write a fancy term, and that's called risk-weighted assets. Risk-weighted assets means there are some loans which are very risky. For example, a personal loan which is uncollateralized. If that is a very risky loan, the risk which the weight which I will attach to it is very high. A loan, for example, a home loan is a collateralized, safest form of loan, because if the borrower doesn't pay up, at least you have the house which the bank can sell to recover the loan amount. So that is the least risky loan. So all the loans and advances are risk weighted, and then you have that in the denominator here, and you have capital, which means broadly equity capital and debt capital in the numerator. The higher the ratio is, the more fundamentally sound that particular bank is. The RBI has said that all Indian scheduled commercial banks are required to maintain.
Capital also includes term deposits and all?
Yes, yes. So basically I'm talking about, yes, tier 1 and tier 2 capital. It includes the deposit base. It includes the equity. It includes the retained earnings which a bank has. It also includes any kind of reserves, revaluation reserves. It also includes any kind of contingencies, as you've said. So that is broadly classified as tier 1 and tier 2 capital. I've written it here. Tier 1 capital, it is the core capital which a bank has, right? And there is a theory which is called the Basel theory or the Basel norm, which says that the higher the ratio is, the better it is for a bank. But Basel says not too high. How much is minimum stipulated is 8%. This is what the international banking community says. As per RBI, RBI says if we are even more strict, not 8%, it has to be 9% for public sector banks. And of course, your 12%, it goes slightly higher. So commercial banks 9% and PSBs at 12%. So from 8%, so let's say that the total tier capital, tier 1 plus tier 2 capital is 100 crores, just an example, right? So in order to get 8%, 0.08 here, you can imagine how high this risk weighted assets cannot be, very has to be at a level that this ratio should be at least 8%, minimum 8%. So it has to be very careful in lending. It has to be very careful. The more the RWA, the lower will become the capital adequacy ratio, and then the bank will get into trouble. So the bank has to be very cautious in deciding where to lend the money, in which avenues to lend. Should it be with SMEs? Should it be with retail lending? Should it be with corporate lending? Should it be personal loans? Personal loans don't have any security, but they have a very high interest rate. And high interest rate means more revenues for the bank. So this is another important term. It is called the capital adequacy ratio. And just a couple of banks which I have covered here. The best 5, for example, HDFC Bank has a capital adequacy ratio of 18.5. You can imagine if the minimum stipulated is 9%, it's double. It's at 18.5. We have the Kathleen Syrian Bank at 23, Bandhan Bank at 24, Kotak 18.2, Axis 18.2. Higher it is, the more fundamentally sound it is. The bank will not have to declare bankruptcy, like many international banks had to do so in the year 2007-8 at the time of the subprime crisis. This is the snapshot of the banking community as a whole right now. This is very recent, I think September 2020. This has been taken from the Mint, the Times of India. Okay, now if you see a couple of things which you can observe, and we've talked about it already. And at this stage, you should be able to interpret this diagram here. Now, look at this figure, 9.9%. What is 9.9%? It is the gross NPAs. So the gross NPAs right now is 9.9%. So it was 9.3% in September 2019. It is 9.9% in September 2020. So this difference of 0.6% is known as a slippage. This difference of 0.6%, because it has increased. The more the NPAs, the more the provisioning the bank would have to do. It has to set aside money, and more provisioning, which obviously impacts the ability of a bank to lend. Because if it parks a lot of money aside from the deposits and it parks it for provisioning, it has less amount of money which is available for further lending. And less is the amount of loans and advances. What does it mean? Less interest income. And less interest income obviously means the revenue gets impacted. The bank may have something like a net profit being negative, which means losses. It can impact or dent the profitability. So this is a slippage. I repeat, slippage is any increase in NPAs, which is observed from one time frame to another. This is over a period of 1 year. It has increased by 0.6%. This is known as a slippage. 8.7%. 8.7% is the overall bank credit growth, and which means the amount of loans which the bank is providing. And this overall figure has increased very marginally. It's currently at 8.7% only, and this is said to be very subdued. As subdued it was in 2019. There hasn't been much change. Okay, credit growth in private sector. This is the overall figure, 8.7 in the private sector. We have 16.5% credit growth, which was something very similar in 2019, September 2019. There hasn't been much change in terms of credit growth, that is loans and advances. But however, the provisioning ratio has increased, which means if the gross NPAs goes up, obviously the provisioning has to be more. So if you see an increase in GNPA, gross NPAs, which also means the provisioning ratio has gone up from 60.5 to 61.5%. Again, impacting the profitability of a bank. So this is how we look at the banking sector. So this was, I hope, CASA we've covered. This link I will share with you in the chat box. This is the ICICI Bank story over the last 1 year. And what we'll do is we'll just go to very important factor, and I'll end with this. This is called rural banking and the digital initiatives which the bank is taking. Okay. Now, you've heard of UPI. You are using UPI Bheem app. Any one of you? Bheem app?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. What does it do? What is UPI 2.0? Any particular feature which you know it's an add-on as compared to UPI 1.0? Any idea? In terms of the where we are. By the way, India is on the highest in terms of our digital initiatives. Our banking, so to say, our digital banking is even better than most of the developed economies. So we're doing very well in this front. And if you talk about rural banking through digital initiatives, for example, a missed call, you give a missed call, even if you don't have internet facility, through SMS, you can get to know your balance. By giving a missed call facility, you can also get to know what is the amount of balance which is there currently. There are something which is called the agri loans. You must have heard of Shishu loans. Shishu loan is a recent RBI initiatives which gives loan to the extent of 5 lakh rupees. Shishu means a kid in Hindi. So these are Shishu loans. It's under the Mudra loan scheme. We have agri credit, Kisan credit card facilities which are there. Tractor loans, loans for tractors which are provided. So these are again retail loans for two-wheelers and light commercial vehicles. So you have the bikes in the rural areas. You have small amount of working capital means for a business, small amount of loans for a business. Some kind of micro or RD, recurring deposits, and of course, general insurance and life insurance. These are some products. By the way, ICICI Bank, HDFC, all these Indian banks, including the foreign banks which are in India, are going to question you a lot on their digital initiatives. So I suggest, this is again taken from HDFC. So I suggest please go through the digital initiatives. It's going to talk a lot about your digital banking and what facilities it is providing. For example, I think 7 years back, banks started off with the concept of milk to money ATMs. So now ATMs, you deposit something like 100 rupees and you get milk in return for it. It's like a milk vending machine. So you have your ATMs, so your cash, automated teller machines. So these are your milk vending machines which you have. Again, something to get the farmer community. And this was basically started off in Rajasthan, where they enrolled around 42,000 farmers. These farmers were unbanked. They didn't even have an account. And through milk to money ATM, started 7-8 years back. This is not very recent, but 7-8 years back, all these 42,000 farmers opened a bank account. And as a result, anybody who wanted milk would go to the milk ATM, deposit 50 rupees or 100 rupees and immediately put their can and they'll have their milk being dispensed like you have a regular dispenser. Again, the purpose is to get people financial inclusion, to get maximum people in the banking community. Right. So this is the chain which you see here.
Thanks, ma'am, for taking us in such detail about these concepts.